They say that you can see as far as the Hog's Back in Surrey from the steep hill above the Devil's Dyke, just to the northwest of Brighton. Certainly it offers one of the most spectacular views possible across the Sussex Weald, even on a misty October day. One legend has it that the devil was so angered by the sound of the church bells drifting his way from the lovely wooded countryside that he decided to flood the whole area by cutting a huge ditch through the downs to the sea. Being the devil, he could only work at night, and while he was digging in the dark, an old lady awoke and lit a candle in her cottage window. The devil saw the light, thought it was the dawn, and fled, never to return. Observers of the racy Brighton scene might be forgiven for thinking that he'd since come back there in other guises. So much has changed in the English country over the decades, and yet so little. Over 125 years ago, John Ackerson Eridge wrote of the place, "The largest attendance of visitors to the Devil's Dyke is during the months of August and September, when frequently as many as 100 carriages a day arrive with parties, either to view the magnificent expanse of scenery which the spot commands, or on picnic excursions, as the establishment has accommodation for many sets of visitors at the same time. By October, the big crowds have vanished, and there's time and space to enjoy the downland and the surrounding villages, and the people who live in them." This is definitely not salmon fishing country. Astonishing, therefore, to find in the tiny village of Edburton, tucked under the downs, a flourishing family business, specialising in delicious smoked salmon. Here, at Spring Salmon, Richard Harris and the rest of his family produce tons of top-quality smoked fish and poultry for gourmets from Brighton and around the world.
We started doing this as a hobby, and then we gave up the farm when we couldn't cope with it any longer, and the salmon just got busier and busier. It's just grown up. One thing led to another, and it just got larger and larger.
We read and hear about oak smoked. Is it genuinely that?
Yes, it is. We're probably one of the only places that could say that it is oak. We use logs rather than sawdust, and we can guarantee that we're using oak only. It doesn't use a lot of wood to smoke a lot of fish, luckily. The chap that built the smokers for us started off on the farm as a tractor driver, and then when we started the fish, he built the first smoker, and he's been with us ever since. We use about 2.5 tons of raw salmon a day. You lose 50% when you smoke it and slice it, so we produce about 1 ton of smoked salmon a day, 5 days a week. We try and make sure there's no waste at all. We take the backbones out of the salmon, and there's always a bit of meat left on, so we thought we'd try taking that off and see if we could sell that in the shop to making mousselines, and that goes very well. That's the last bit of waste that was really good then.
Local girl Tammy Spicer lives in a cottage at Saddlescombe Farm, just beside the Devil's Dyke. Here, her particular responsibility is for feeding the calves.
I do get attached to the calves, and likewise the calves get attached to you as well. I did have one once, and you do find with young stock that they're difficult to round up and get in from a field, but if this calf would follow me, then the whole lot would follow on behind it. So I could have sort of 20, 30 calves following along behind me, no trouble at all, just because of this one calf.
Tammy's other job is with some rather different animals at Janice Stanford's Badgers, Kennels and Cattery, down at the bottom of Clappers Lane, Fulking.
Hello, Buster. He's a good boy. Sheba. Farm animals, you treat them with great respect. Making a living from milk or beef or whatever is completely different to looking after pets, which you have to treat more or less as humans. Siren is a good girl. They need a lot of attention because coming from the home, they've got to realise that they're not deserted completely, so we've got to sort of be makeshift parents. People get very attached to their pets, and you've got to follow that on when you're looking after them when they're out. We have postcards sent to dogs, which we religiously sit and read to them, of course. But I can understand their attachment, but it's so different from the farm way, you know. I remember 2 Russian Blues. The woman was moving, and she was in the area, and she visited them regularly and brought them in packages of steak and mince and toys. The whole cattery was just littered with toys and food for these animals. It was incredible. I think we find often the younger cats are quite happy to play together. The older ones do tend to take themselves off in a corner, a comfortable corner, and sit and wait to be taken home again sometimes. But they all settle in quite happily, but the younger ones definitely fit better. Farm life's the way for me, I'm afraid. If you're bored into it, I think you get stuck in the way of life, and anything else, it doesn't compensate for it. I was born within the view of the South Downs, so living here is a great bonus, you know, it's fantastic.
Just behind the Royal Oak pub at Poynings is a workshop where Chris Pellett from Albourne and his team of craftsmen fashion stone and marble into works of art. All young and creative, they're keeping alive one of the world's most ancient skills.
The downs obviously are chalk, but as you get down to here it is a sandstone. In fact, when we dug up to lay water main through here, the stone and the rock that I picked up I've used in my own fireplace at home. There's some interesting local stone, which is a Sussex marble, the seam does run through here, commonly known as winkle stone. It's full of fossils, it's freshwater fossils, it's a very colourful type of marble really. I'd much rather be using like Sussex sandstone and Kentish rag and Purbeck and Portland stone, but really it's just difficult getting hold of the material in the time that people are prepared to wait. We tackle almost anything in stone or marble, the restoration, even headstones. We tend to only do the country churchyards where we can have some good old-fashioned design in the headstone. We still do that sort of work when we can. There's 2 sides to the restoration, either in the marble here, which is both valuable and difficult, and then there's the restorations, like building-type restoration work. One of the jobs I remember was a very large memorial which went to a small churchyard. The church warden marked the wrong grave, and so we fixed over a tonne's weight of granite, black polished granite with gold lettering and a vase at each corner, and really decorative, but on the wrong grave.
Sheila Marshall has chosen to live a solitary life at Oak Cottage, Poynings, because of her love of the rolling hills around the Devil's Dyke.
So much about the Downs that I love. Oh, they keep me alive, basically. Just the joy of looking at them, just going out there and usually doing something. Well, a constant source of stimulation. Sometimes people say to me, sort of, what do you do out there in the country all day, you know? I mean, don't you get bored without the stimulation of the town, this, that and the other? I just say, well, you know, there's so much to do, I haven't got time to do. You know, picking berries, making jam, whatever, you know, even gardening, sort of, gathering the wood, you know, especially in the winter time. People think, oh my God, you know, what do you want to go out and, you know, that freezing weather for, sort of thing. But by the time you've got out there and you've got your wood loaded up and everything, you're so hot that you can actually have the time, you can actually stand around in freezing cold weather, freezing cold conditions, and you've got half an hour while you're still warm and you can look at birds and this, that and the other. It's much easier to see birds in the winter time. There's not so many leaves on the trees and things like that. And if I wasn't going wooding, I mean, it would take sort of wild horses to drag me out in the cold weather and just sort of start standing around freezing. If I'm in a place without a fire, it seems like the heart's gone out of the house. I mean, a lot of people have a television now instead of a fire. And in the centre of the room, that's where everybody concentrates. And I prefer to concentrate on a fire. I think like in the old days, that's when people used to sing songs and tell stories looking into the fire. And it encouraged people to be more creative themselves rather than absorbing what was there for them.
Sometimes Sheila invites local children into her tiny cottage and entertains them with her own unique puppet show.
Hello, my name's Woodpecker.
I like to portray animals and birds in nature.
I'm going to pick some insects out of this box. I like eating insects. I had a maggot then. Do you like eating maggots?
No.
Don't you? Oh, not even woodlice. They're nice and crunchy.
When I was a child, I was always looking at pictures of animals and birds, and I was always, you know, highly interested in all that sort of thing.
Oh, hello, swallow. Oh, I'm going to Africa. Have you ever been to Africa, boys and girls?
No. No.
Oh, it's a long, long way away. It's 6,000 miles away. And I go every year. I quite like winter. That's all right for you, Woodpecker, but there's not many insects that I like. They all die off in the winter time. That's why I'm going to Africa. Bye, everybody. See you in the springtime. Bye. Bye, Swallow. Bye, Woodpecker.
What's all that rumpus going on up there? Can't a fella get a good day's sleep?
I was just saying goodbye to Swallow. Swallow's going to Africa.
Oh, Africa. Oh. Bye, Swallow. See you next spring.
Bye.
I'm going back to bed.
Well, think I'll go to bed as well.
Joanna Lintott lives in Fulking. She's a skilled calligrapher, which means that she writes very beautifully and colourfully. She gets much of her inspiration from the Downs, which tower behind her home.
When I go up there, I get an immense feeling of peace because I feel that they've been there for so many hundreds of years. I think it's their grandeur, their spaciousness, and their timelessness. And it's just a wonderful, calming feeling. The spaciousness I love, and the fact that I can see the sea, because I adore the sea. When I look out of the window at this hill, which I can see from my workroom, Every hour of the day it's different, every season it's different. And the light changes all the time, and I find that absolutely fascinating. And that you've got so many colours to play with, so many designs, it can keep you fascinated forever. What I like to do with my photographs, if possible, is to look at them not just as trees or a view or whatever, but just look at them as patches of colour. I think what's so exciting about calligraphy is that you're using another artist's art form anyway, the writer of the prose or the poetry. You are helping to bring that to other people's notice by dint of, hopefully, your beautiful writing. Because if your writing's beautiful, people are probably going to want to read it. I couldn't live without the work I do. I love it. I love just being alone, writing like that. Gives me an absolute thrill.
Frank Harmon lives with his family at Paythorne Farm near Fulking. He's a dealer in scrap metal and other things as well, but his pride and joy are his horses and traps, which he shows with success all over the country. His daughter Jane and his grandson Luke are very much part of the family team.
Oh, I've had horses for 30 years. Different types and sorts. My daughter Jane had her first pony when she was 5. She's had ponies ever since. My daughter does all the grooming, the brushing and the scrubbing and cleans the harness. Stand in front of him, Gov. Come to one side of him. My grandson Luke, he likes the farm and the animals and that, and one thing and the other, you know, he does near enough what he wants to do. Lives his own life, virtually. We don't never have no trouble with him or nothing like that. The trolley is about 23 years old now, but when it was first new, it was all brightened, but the wood's mellowed now and it looks much better to do it, you know, now than what it did when it was first built. But we had it built by a boat builder down in Shoremere, in your back garden. My wife, she paints them and varnishes them and cleans them and scrubs them, and I just give the orders. Can't have too many bosses, you know, anyone to be one, don't I? Well, I learned to drive watching other people mainly, you know, and going with the old fellas when I was a boy and that. The old traders and around the streets with them and that. It's just something you pick up if you were that keen. You've got to be a bit careful driving horse on the roads today because not everybody's polite. Not all these motor drivers are polite, like 95% of them are, but then you just get that percentage that isn't polite. So you've got to watch what you're doing, you know. You can't let your horse get on or gallop away too fast. Well, you've got to be a bit steady with him. Or you'll very soon end up through the edge or something like that. You don't really want that, do you?
Rudyard Kipling worshipped this rolling Sussex countryside, and it's hard to avoid remembered snatches of his verse whenever you're wandering through it. Perhaps any picture of the South Downs should end with these lines from his famous poem Sussex, which he wrote in 1902. Clean of officious fence or hedge, half wild and wholly tame, the wise turf cloaks the white cliff edge, as when the Romans came. What sign of those that fought and died at shift of sword and sword? The barrow and the camp abide, the sunlight and the sward. Here leaps ashore the full sou'west, all heavy-winged with brine. Here lies above the folded crest the Channel's leaden line. And here the sea fogs lap and cling, and here, each warning each, the sheep bells and the ship bells ring along the hidden beach.